Quiet. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rabi Micah Greenstein, and on behalf of the board of the National Civil Rights Museum, a warm welcome to each and every one of you. Before I go any further, I know I'm supposed to do this at the end, but we have a relatively new president who is already an all-star. Where is Terri Freeman? Are you out there? Please stand. There she is, our leader. Friends, I've lived in LA and New York, Florida, and the Midwest. Being chief rabbi for a large synagogue is kind of like being in the NBA, even if you don't get paid as much. You get traded from team to team, and you do the most that you can with the time that you have wherever you are. And when I lived on the coasts, this Martin Luther King Jr. weekend was a holiday vacation weekend. It's only here in Memphis, steps away from where you're seated, where Dr. King breathed his last breath on earth. It's only here where I fully understood the spiritual magnitude of this weekend. Not until I moved to Memphis and shed tears watching former sanitation workers with the "I am a man" sign return to this historic site. Not until I accompanied Reverend Billy Kiles, who held Dr. King as he lay dying, steps from where we are. Not until I witnessed firsthand the tallest man I have ever been in the presence of, Nelson Mandela. Not until I saw Madiba break down like a baby on the balcony after explaining it was the picture of this place that gave him the strength and courage to endure what he did at Robbins Island. Not until I was standing on this holy ground and reminder for all humanity, not until I was right here did I fully grasp why this is truly a holiday. Yes, tomorrow may be a vacation and sports day for people across America, but in Memphis, tomorrow is what the third Monday in January is supposed to be, a holy day, a pilgrimage for thousands who'll come to this site as we have come this evening to reflect not only on the memory and history of Dr. King, because that's relatively easy. The hard part is facing ourselves. We forget that Dr. King was not impoverished himself. He was just obsessed with helping poor people. King, the youngest ever to win the Nobel Prize, with an earned PhD, oratorical skills off the charts, and offers to be set up financially for the rest of his life, died defending garbage workers in need of a 10-cent raise in Memphis, Tennessee. And when warned what might happen to him with all the death threats, he said, "The question is not what will happen to me if I help the sanitation workers. The question is what will happen to them if I do not." The mission of this hallowed site we are in is not simply to chronicle the history, move hearts, and move on. The mission of this national treasure is to inspire you and me to action. So even as we prepare tonight to raise up the courage of heroes like King, Perry Wallace, and others, what about you and me? Are we really using our talents, endowments, and success sacrificially or selfishly? I guess that's why this place is more like church. It reminds us that we must not only comfort the afflicted, we must afflict the comfortable, especially when the comfortable are you and me. And that is why I'm also delighted that this annual collaboration between the National Civil Rights Museum, the Grizzlies, and the entire NBA was launched and will hopefully only grow much stronger in the years ahead. But this was the year 2014 that was so racially charged in so many ways, not just on the court, but throughout America. So to the program, what does a short, white, aging rabbi like me share in common with a tall, handsome brother like Bob Lanier? Two things, actually. First, I was born in Springfield, Massachusetts, home of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame, where, in case you didn't know, every visitor to my birth city can compare the size of their foot to that of Bob Lanier when you walk in to the Hall of Fame.
Shame on you.
It gets better, Bob. Number two, my family later moved to Jacksonville, Florida, where in 1970, the JU Dolphins, led by Artis Gilmore, met the Bonnies of St. Bonaventure, led by this man, in the Final Four. The forgotten sports fact about that national semifinal is that Jacksonville won for one obvious reason. Bob Lanier was injured in the game before and couldn't play. He's the NBA's #1 draft pick by the Pistons, all-rookie team, the Detroit Star, who then elevated Milwaukee to their division championship win, 8 NBA All-Star games in 14 seasons, and among the few players to have his number 16 retired by 2 teams, the Pistons and the Bucks. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the board of the National Civil Rights Museum, 3 thank yous. First, thank you for supporting this sacred cause more than ever before. I wanted you to get a sense of the power of the place you're in. 2, thank you for your presence this evening in the most fitting place on the planet to be, on King Weekend. And finally, thank you for welcoming the legend on the court and role model off the court, who will introduce tonight's panel, Mr. Bob Lanier.
Michael, thank you.
Bless you.
Thank you so much. I need some blessings too.
You got it.
So keep me in that loop.
You can count on it.
We have a distinguished panel and honorees tonight that are with us. Instead of me introducing y'all, I'm gonna let y'all get up and introduce yourselves and give them a piece of what y'all came here for. Go.
Stand up?
No, you don't have to stand up.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I am Douglas Scarborough. Very obviously, I'm not Mayor A.C. Wharton, who is headed on the way back here. He is headed on en route from Ripley, Tennessee. It's an engagement there that he had been invited to speak at about a year ago. So we wanted to try to get him in 2 places at once. So the way that we do that is I come in and sit in on his behalf. But I'm Douglas Scarborough. I head his Office of Talent and Human Capital, focused on developing, recruiting, and retaining talent overall for the city of Memphis. And then I'm also Chief Learning Officer for the City of Memphis, focused on training and development of City of Memphis employees.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Maraniss, and I am here because I have recently written a book about a man named Perry Wallace, who was the first African-American basketball player in the Southeastern Conference, played at Vanderbilt in the late 1960s. And I'm proud to say it just hit the New York Times bestseller list on the civil rights list and the sports list last week. Perry stayed here in the Lorraine Motel as a high school player for Pearl High School in Nashville. And it was a tremendous honor touring this building with many of these legendary figures today, and to see so many exhibits that touched on Perry's life. You know, we walked past an exhibit about James Meredith integrating Ole Miss. Perry Wallace had to play at Ole Miss just a couple of years later, the first African American to ever play a basketball game there. We walked past an exhibit about University of Alabama. Perry Wallace played there just a couple of years later and experienced tremendous challenges and obstacles on the road to great success. He's now a professor of law at American University in Washington, D.C., and he asked that I express his great thanks to everyone here today for listening to bits of his story. Thank you very much.
How you doing? I'm Vince Carter. I'm going into my 17th year with the Memphis Grizzlies, and it's great to meet and be here with everyone, and thank you.
I'm Chauncey Billups. I'm Chauncey Billups, and I'm recently retired. Played 17 years. I've been knowing Vince since we was in high school. We came out of high school together. But I'm very, very honored to be here on a day like today and tomorrow, obviously. Today was a beautiful, beautiful day for me coming here and touring this facility. Can't wait to bring my kids back, but thank you.
Earl to Pearl.
We can do it for you.
Hello? Hello? Yes. Is it on? Okay, hi. I'm Earl Monroe. I'm a former NBA player for the New York Knicks and the old Baltimore Bullets. Won a championship with the New York Knicks, and visiting here today brought back a lot of memories because I lived through so many of these years and whatnot. And it's just a great honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
We all played together. And by the way, my name is Sam Moore, and this is where it all began for Sam and Dave. And out of all the years that I recorded here, would you believe, never, ever been into the Lorraine. And it was an honor and a pleasure. And every time I looked at something new, or something that I hadn't seen, or something that I already knew, chills came over me. It's so honored and wonderful to be here, and sad because the message that he has left, we don't seem to want to carry, or we're not carrying around. So to say that, and I want to sit down now, my name is Sam Moore, and thank you.
Hi, I'm Elliot Perry, born and raised here in Memphis. Went to college here at the University of Memphis. Been back home and serving as the chair of the Grizzlies Foundation. Not only that, serving as a board member of the National Civil Rights Museum. So it's an honor to be here and honor to have all of these guys in our city. So played 10 years in the NBA and been retired, so thanks.
And hello, I'm Jason Collins. I recently retired after playing 13 years in the NBA, former teammate of Vince Carter with the New Jersey Nets. Last year I played for the Brooklyn Nets, and I want to echo so many words, sentiments that I heard earlier. It was my first time experiencing the museum today, and chills. Thank you.
Give all of them a hand, please. Now, My Brother's Keeper initiative is about closing opportunity gaps for all children, but with particular focus on boys and young men of color. Now, let's talk about some of the data. 80,000 children in Memphis live below, at, or just slightly above the poverty line. That's chilling. 40,000 of those children are growing up in households that earn less than $10,000 per year. Nationally, Black and Latino children are between 6 and 9 times more likely than white children to live in areas of concentrated poverty. Poverty is the #1 risk factor inhibiting educational attainment. A child born into a poor family only has a 9% chance of getting a college degree. 50 years after passage of the Civil Rights Act, race and poverty, like race and educational attainment, continue to be inextricably linked. Doug, tough question for you right now with this data. I know you wish the mayor were here so he could talk about it, but what are y'all doing?
Hit me with a tough question first. So I'm going to talk about it two different ways. One is the quickly, the wonky way, and then the other way is the way about stories and about the real fact of what we need to do. So first, the wonky way. We're doing a number of things. I'm the point of contact for the Obama administration and locally here with My Brother's Keeper. We have 4 domains that we've set up. This is based upon, we have Bloomberg Philanthropies, which has an innovation team here looking at the domains of education, employment, health and wellness, and also justice. We have metrics for those areas that we're working to meet. And like I said, that's the wonky kind of data-driven area that we're going to be able to have, where we have community engagement, where we have set metrics and goals that we're working on. Mm-hmm. But the story and the thought pattern about what we really need to do, I feel like is much more gripping. One of the things I think about is, Andrew was talking about a book, and there's a book I think about, The Other Westmore. And Westmore grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. And there was a story in the Baltimore Sun on the same day that came out that talked about Westmore. And the one that was writing the book had gone on Rhodes Scholar, worked in the White House, had all kind of honors. And then there was another Westmore that was very similar age, similar situation. He grew up very close to him. He was in prison for life. I feel like the story that we tell so much here in Memphis and the statistics that we see is of the second Westmore, or the Westmore that's on that route to prison. And somehow we're throwing our hands up now when we have so many more opportunity than what we see when we walk out of these doors here at the National Civil Rights Museum, where we have so much more opportunity for education, for employment, for everything for young African American males. But as you look at our outcomes, we don't see the outcomes that are leaning in and that are collaborate that will come out of all of the struggle that we've seen over the years. So you ask, what is it that we need to do? And the story becomes there needs to be so much more. And we talked about this. We had a My Brother's Keeper Summit where we had Eric Holder, Attorney General Eric Holder, come in. And the two main things that come out of it are challenge and support. We need to not only set goals as a community, but each one of us, everybody that's involved in the life of a young African-American male, of a minority male, needs to not only challenge them, but then provide them support that they need in order to reach and do what they want to do with their lives. Every one of them has a dream. Every one of them has something they want to do. And everybody that's successful sitting on this stage and everybody that's successful that I've talked to that are African-American males, that are minority males, have somebody in their life that not only supported them, but also challenged them and pushed them to be the best that they can be. So as a community, the things that we'll do are both challenge and support. We'll have a number of different committees. We'll have a number of different interventions that we'll put forth, but they'll all be based upon the fact that we'll need to find more people to challenge and support our young men in order for them to become successful, and these statistics look totally different.
It takes a village to raise a child.
Absolutely.
Everybody's got to participate. Elliot, not Elliot, but Andrew, based on your research, are we better off now than we were back when Dr. King was alive?
Well, I think about that question in terms of are we better off now, talking about sports and education and the research I did on the story about Perry Wallace. And in some very obvious ways, we're better off now. When Perry Wallace was a freshman, University of Mississippi canceled its 2 games against Vanderbilt rather than play against a team that had an African-American player. He said that going on road trips throughout the SEC, that he feared what's the worst thing that can happen on this trip, and it was to be shot and killed, either on the court or around town before a game. So in ways, and they even changed the rules on him. Perry Wallace in high school was a fantastic dunker. As a freshman, he was a fantastic dunker. They banned the slam dunk before his sophomore year while you were playing college basketball. The slam dunk was banned, and everyone calls it the Lou Alcindor rule, but it was Perry Wallace who was going to be playing against Kentucky twice a year, and Adolph Rupp was running the rules committee at the time. Yeah, no, you can't. But in some ways things are better. You think about, I think about college football in the South now, and looking at the Southeastern Conference, the same conference that Perry Wallace played in, and you've got these stadiums with 100,000 people in Alabama, in Mississippi, in Georgia, Louisiana. And those are the same states where you see the greatest voter suppression, the highest mass incarceration rates. So you need to put athletics in the whole context of what's happening in society. And so obviously there have been tremendous gains, and Perry Wallace always says, let's build on the progress, but there's certainly great progress that still needs to be made.
Vince, how can we take some of that, what he just said, and apply it to basketball and what you guys are doing today in the league?
I want to touch on both of them. First of all, I think we can't yet let our young youth use that as an excuse. I don't have this. I come from that. Because I think that's where it starts, first off, because it's already embedded in their mind that we're poor and we don't have it, so we can't make it. But if they look into the history of sports, or just in life in general, there's people who have rose above poverty-stricken communities in different situations. So I think that's first and foremost. We have to teach these young people to believe I can make it out of anything. I can do whatever I put my mind to, because it's possible. For all these kids who have the goal to become professional athletes like us, they put their mind to it, so they go in the gym, go on the field, and put the hours and hours of practice. Well, take that same energy and do the same as far as trying to make it out, because there's plenty of them if they just do the history. I always tell my young campers, like, understand the history of the game, understand who you are and what you've done, understand what these men have done in their field, And I think it actually puts it in perspective and motivates you to kind of get over the top from the community that you come from.
You know, we're in a lot of the NBA. I always talk about that whole situation that the NBA draws more than just basketball players. Chauncey, talk about other opportunities. Maybe we should be sending different kind of messaging to kids, because very few of them make the NBA.
Yeah, that's exactly what I kind of want to piggyback on a little bit of what you guys are talking about is oftentimes I think the media, you know, as a young African-American kid growing up in the inner city, I didn't read a lot other than going to school and doing homework, but I didn't read books or I didn't read. So oftentimes what I seen is what I wanted. And what happens is you get a young kid who what he sees is what he wants, and he sees Vince Carter dunking on people, he wants to be Vince Carter. Or he sees Jay-Z rapping and he wants to be Jay-Z. But oftentimes he doesn't see that we have a black senator, or we have a black mayor, or oftentimes you don't see those things because they're not reported on as much as maybe, you know, Vince scoring 65 points against Jason Collins in a game. Because I wouldn't let him score 65 on me. I'll foul out twice before he play. No, but you know, oftentimes, you know, I wish that some of our media outlets would you know, put more emphasis on showing more people of color that are very influential to some of the young kids. Coming here today, I mean, you know, living in Memphis, I'm pretty sure kids come here on field trips all the time, so they have the pleasure and the luxury of coming here and seeing what our ancestors went through. But I'm from Denver, Colorado, and I'm embarrassed to say that I've never been to the museum, although I came here to play for years and years. I never took the time to do it, and I'm embarrassed to say that, but today it really changed my life, and I can't wait to bring my kids here to show them, you know, just what their great-grandparents and their grandparents went through to make it so easy for us, you know, today. But, you know, I just really, really would like to see, you know, some of our media outlets just show more positivity that's not basketball or football or a sport or entertainment, you know. And I think that when some of our kids see those things and they embrace that and they say, oh, maybe I can be, you know, of course with Obama being president now, you see that all the time. We never seen that as a possibility, you know, growing up. I know, you know, Vince can speak to that as well, being the same age, but we never even seen that as a possibility. Now seeing that, there's a lot of kids. I mean, I have camps, I have a leadership academy in Denver that a lot of kids I talk to every single summer. Those are some of the things that they want to do now. You know, they want to be maybe the president of the United States, maybe the mayor of Denver, mayor of Memphis, and those, you know, those habits and goals are starting to change a little bit from one that is basketball. We know how hard it is to make it in basketball. We've been very blessed and lucky to play this game for a long time, but there's guys that, you know, I grew up with that were better than me, that didn't apply themselves, that didn't make it for whatever reason. But that's the real story. The guys that don't make it, we're lucky enough to have made it, but it's rare. It's a rarity, and we don't want to discourage kids and say, man, you know, that's 1% chance. You probably no. We don't want to do that. We want to give them all the encouragement that we can. However, knowing, man, you got a much better opportunity to be the president of FedEx or to be the president of one of these big industries than you do of being Vince Carter or Jason Collins. So, I mean, that's I think one of the things that will probably help.
That's why education is so important.
Sure.
That messaging of education is so important. You had something to say?
Terri Wallace wasn't just a great basketball player. He was the valedictorian of his high school. And he didn't necessarily relish the opportunity to come in and desegregate the SEC. He saw basketball as a way out of the South. And so his mind was set on earning a basketball scholarship to a school in the Big Ten. UCLA recruited him. But what he saw on a lot of these recruiting trips is something he didn't like, and it was that the players, especially the African-American players, he believed were just being exploited for their athletic abilities on many of these campuses that he visited. You know, and I was curious on y'all's recruiting trips and your experience on campus. How did you deal with those pressures? You know, that you're there. In some cases, you know, the coach might say, to play basketball first, you know, as opposed to earn your degree?
Well, I'll say this. I come from a family full of teachers. So education was first and foremost. You know, it was understood. I understood I'm not an athlete student, I'm a student athlete. And you play this game for so long, and like I said, we're fortunate to play for so long, and you don't worry about it. But I think the biggest thing, and I have a basketball camp, we have an education station, and you know, it was sad to see that some of these kids didn't know how to turn on the computer, and they didn't know how to apply themselves. And that's the biggest thing, more than anything, for these young kids to understand. Learn how to apply yourself, and then your doors were open, and everything makes more sense. And for me, you break it down, and you say, okay, you look at Michael Jordan. He played for 13, 14 years. I was lucky to play 17. And when you break those numbers down, I think it kind of puts it all in perspective, lets these kids know, yeah, I'm playing for a long time, but there's still life after. You're still 35, 36, 37 years old, and you still have a long life to live. What are you going to do now? You're going to run your money dry? Or are you going to make that work for you and help the next kid, or the generation behind you? And I think these kids, once you put that out there and you get them to understand how it works and how they apply themselves, it becomes second nature. And the next man wants to help the next man, and so on and so forth. So I think it's important for our communities and everybody. Really, we can't talk about it like right here. Once we get outside these doors, that's when it matters, because it can stay in here. It'll stick to us and be like, oh man, that was great. But are we going to do something about it once we leave here tonight and going forward?
Jason, do you have a mic?
Right here.
Good. How can us in sports play a bigger role in terms of influencing young men of color to be all that they can be?
Well, I think what Chauncey was just talking about, continuing when you're out in public, talk about your education, talk about, I always mention the fact that I graduated from Stanford, that when I went to college, it wasn't just to go to the best basketball school. It was to go to a school that had the best combination of academics and athletics. And it was close to some of my family as well. But when you're doing these camps or participating in whatever interactions you have with young people, stress the importance of, like you were saying, education. Education is so important, so we continue to grow as human beings.
Elliot, we were talking a little bit earlier, and I know that you really believe in this program. How are the Memphis Grizzlies going to take it to another level?
I think as an organization, wins and losses are important. I mean, that's why we play the game. I mean, that's why the Grizzlies are here, and most NBA teams are here. But I think we've chosen to go beyond that. And I think one of the ways we've chosen to go beyond that is not just about giving resources to our community, because I think you can write a check. That's easy. We seek to get people involved. We thought that how could we make a tangible difference in our community? And the way we could make a tangible difference in our community is we can get people involved with other people. Everybody here has an experience they can share with a young person. And that experience can help that young person move on past what Vince was talking about, not using where they come from as an excuse, because it's easy to do that, to use that as an excuse. And so we have a number of programs with the Grizzlies Foundation, and Diane is executive director of the Grizzlies Foundation, but we have a great team mentoring program where we pair 9 adults with 3 kids. If any of you want to get involved with our team mentoring program, we would love to have you. 3 adults with 9 kids. I'm sorry, 3 adults with 9 kids. But we also partner with a lot of other organizations.
Guard, weren't you?
I was a guard. Yes, I was a guard. Yeah. So not a thinker. Yeah. But I mean, it's been fantastic, because I think the way I see it is the Grizzlies Foundation is out front in terms of not only giving resources but connecting people with people. And I think that's the way we can make a difference. I think everybody has a part to play. We don't have to all play the big part. We just continue to chip away at it. We continue to put our arms around young people, tell them how important education is. we continue to do our part in terms of encouraging some young person that, yeah, you can do it, but you have to apply yourself like Vince talked about. And then education is really, for me, is your real freedom. I think it doesn't matter how many footballs you throw, basketballs you shoot, baseballs you throw. Ultimately, education is going to be your real freedom, and we need to get our kids to see that education is the way out. Education is ultimately the way out, either way. If you are able to play 17 years, 10 years, 15 years in the NBA, still education is the way out.
Tell the people about what your granddaddy told you.
Yeah, my granddad, I always talk about my grandfather because my grandfather had a 5th grade education. And, you know, he told me 3 things. Work hard, provide for your family, and keep a roof over your family's head. Now, that may not mean that's anything to anybody else, but I just think that that was the foundation for me to know that I can go out every day, I can work hard and have a positive attitude about what I was doing. And when I do have a family, I can provide for that family every day. He had 9 kids, and he provided for that family every day. And you get up every morning and you go to work. And so, you know, for me, that's a part of the village you talk about, chipping away at it. That's a part of the village. That one person encouraging me that I can do something. He marched he marched with Dr. King in the march in the sanitation march. So, I mean, it's just, again, we can sit here and talk about it all day. At the end, how do we get out and use what God has given us, our most precious gift God has given us? How do we use our time? We can use our resources, but are we willing to use our time?
Sam and Mr. Earl of Pearl over here, y'all kind of lived through a lot of the civil rights movement, right?
Starting all over again.
No, so what I'm trying to ascertain is, can y'all give us a little feel of that era, number one? And then number two, can you say, what are we really making a difference today from the dream of the messaging that we wanted, that Dr. King wanted?
Are we making a difference? We were. But let's go back a little bit. You know, there's a little boy. When I first came about, I came out learning the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I carried this speech on and on and on. And there was a young lady in Miami that I used to say to her, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said this. So one day I think she just got sick of it. She said, who is that? So I had the newspaper and I was trying to sell it and I had my bow tie on and my suit. And I showed it to her. She said, Sammy, he's from Sandalsville, Georgia. What are you talking about? And I got angry with her. Then I started listening to the message of, at the time, of Martin. And the more I listened, the more I took into my mind. The more I listened to Elijah, the more I listened to Martin, the more I listened to all the greats that have set this up today, from whence. And I asked myself this, did they die for this? This is awful. We have made 4 steps forward and 5 steps or 30 steps backwards. Education, love, loyalty, legacy, in the whole ball game.
But what do you think the reason is for that?
Parents not educating their child. This little boy here, my grandson, when I first brought him here and I came here to promote the song They Killed the King, and his mother and his grandmother, which is white. Okay. And this little boy at the time, he was 5 or 6. And his grandmother brought him over, and I was singing the song in rehearsal. And at that time, I let him, he wanted to sing it, and I said, fine. But after he started singing, I wanted him to shut up, because he was so bad. But guess what he did? He remembered the words. And I said, and today when they were walking him through, and his grandmother told him that he was going to be coming here today, he was so excited. So I take him to one side to walk with him. And he said, Grandpa, he said, I want to go over here and I want to listen to the message. I want to see, I want to learn what this man is speaking about and talking about. 7? Man, that's great. That is the most wonderful thing in the world. But to go back and say, well, have we made strides? We did. Are we making it now? No. The social media and everybody else and everything else around us, I sit and I watch, and it bothers me every day, because Martin said inclusion, not exclusion. Nobody's listening. And that's the way I feel about it.
Wow. I hate to be you talking next.
Well, I tell you, that's a hard act to follow. I wish I was singing now. But yeah, I think over the course of the years, we've lived through the civil rights, and just to make this perfectly clear, Bob also lived through that as well. But I grew up, I'm from Philadelphia, and I grew up looking at all the images on TV, and that kind of really set the stage for my life, to tell you the truth. Seeing all those things, and being in the North, it was a little bit different. Because it was something just like wars that we see now. We see wars every place else, not here in the United States. So we don't really touch it as much. And then I went to school in North Carolina, and then I was about the same thing. I was out there. We sat at these lunch counters. We went to out in the rural areas to try and promote voter registration. And through all that, it really changed my life. And let me just say this about being here as well. I never got a chance to see Dr. King. I missed the March on Washington, and when I was playing in college, I missed him coming through this Winston-Salem to speak and whatnot. And I felt as though when he passed away that it left a hole in because I was so moved by his words, and I felt as though he was like he was talking to me. I had my own personal preacher talking, and when he said the things, and as it rolled off of his mouth, I felt all those things. And I was telling Chauncey as we were walking through here, in my first year, after he got assassinated, I started reading a book by Lerone Bennett called This Manner of Man. And in that book, it had all the speeches of Martin Luther King. And I used to read those speeches before the games. And then I would go out, I'd be really fired up, and then go out and play. And to see the changes in this world, from that time to this, it's a lot of changes that has happened. But at the same time, like Sam said, we've taken a few steps forward, we've taken a few steps backwards. I felt when King was assassinated, we took a step backwards because there was nobody else to fill that void in leadership. We had a lot of people that were there. And as we look at all the things that happened during that time, we talk about the leaders and whatnot, but it was the masses of people, that really made this thing happen. all those people who went to jail, all those people who were in the marches, they were much about the civil rights as anybody else. And this is a feeling that I got, walking through here today. It was such an eerie feeling. The speech about the mountaintop, going to the mountaintop. I might not get there with you, but I've looked over, I've seen it, and then going into that room, which was the last room he was in. And I've seen all these changes all through the years, and it's been great. I mean, obviously, we've been able to make money. I've been able to do things in my career, and these guys have, doing things in their career as well. But I still think that we are missing something. And what we're missing is true leadership in this country. Mm. And, yes, we have a president, we have vice presidents and whatnot, but on a local, in the regional and so forth, we don't have those type of leaders that lead us anymore. And I think that's one of the things that we're missing. And that's why we're not as ahead as I think we should be right now.
Oh, whew, that's very good. I'd give you 2 claps for that one, man. The 2 players that are sitting up here for a moment, and Jason, you can chime in if you want to. Is there an extra responsibility on athletes to help in these kinds of causes, and that you can make an impression on young men of color? And the reason I'm asking the question is because I hear so much the excuse that somebody said up here earlier, and it might have been you, Vince, about kids making excuses. I can't, because I'm from a certain place, because I got a certain look, I can't be successful. How do we instill confidence in these young people with the status you guys have on TV and all that? I mean, because that's a role y'all could play in that.
Well, I'll start it. I always personally took it as a responsibility of mine to live right, to mentor and tutor young kids, to let kids understand and know that basketball or rapping or singing is not the only way that you can become successful in life. And then as Earl the Pearl just talked about the lack of leadership regionally and in cities, realistically, a lot of these kids look up to Zach Randolph a lot more than they look up to the mayor, and that's sad, but that's true. And I think that if that is the case, and guys like us know that and can play into that, now we can lead these guys the right way. But so many times, so many of us in our profession, in our business, they don't look at leading and look at this as a responsibility of theirs, and they maybe sway young kids' perception the other way, that you can go out and you can hang out and you can smoke and you can drink and you can still make it. You can still be successful and you can walk around and, feel entitled and treat people, like they're beneath you, and it's okay because you're a great player, you're a great athlete, or whatever it is. We do have those guys, unfortunately, in our profession, in our business, and it's hurtful. It really is. It's hurtful because these young kids really, really look up to these guys, and that's why I really appreciate guys like Kevin Durant, who is just a great, great dude, who gets it. He gets it, and a lot of these guys do, but too many of them don't. But I think that's that leadership quality and that lack of leadership that Earl Monroe talked about is glaring. It really is glaring, and we're lucky to have guys like these guys to try to carry on that torch and at least plant some of those seeds, because it really is. I often tell kids all the time, it's not your circumstances, it's your decision making. Mm-hmm. But in order to make good decisions, you would have to have seen it. You just can't wake up and know how to make good decisions. I was lucky, as Vince has. I grew up in a household in the inner city, in the neighborhood, but I had 2 parents And we didn't have much, but I seen them going to work every day. I seen the hard work they put in every day. I seen them, when I wanted Jordans and I couldn't get them, I seen them put it on layaway and work hard to get it off 3 or 4 weeks later when they still wasn't new, but they was new to me. You know what I'm saying? So I seen that, and those things shaped me. They really did. They shaped me. But I was, obviously, as we know in our community, that's you lucky if you got 2 parents in the household. And I was very, very lucky, but most kids aren't. So how do we get to those kids? And I think a lot of times sports figures can do that.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think Magic Johnson recently talked about it, encouraging athletes to use that platform when they see something going on in the country outside of the world of sports. It's important to speak up. We saw it with the 2 Olympic athletes in the 60s when they got up on the podium and speaking up for social injustice and raising their hand in the air. And sometimes when you do speak up, some people will try to knock you down and say, shut up and just play your sport. But that's not the case, because like Chauncey said, a lot of the people look up to these athletes. When last year with the Donald Sterling situation and LeBron spoke up, it sort of like freed everyone to take the, okay, LeBron's speaking about it, so it's okay, waiting for that cue. And so when you have an opportunity, and you saw it obviously with players wearing the I Can't Breathe t-shirts, letting the community know that we stand with you, that we hear you, we see what's going on in the world, that we support you. And also the NBA, not fining, because sometimes in some other leagues, they might have been fined or discouraged, but it's important to show the community that we're all standing together. And it's not about us versus them, but it's about support. It's about encouraging people to be better human beings.
Just to add to it, I think that whole word status is the killer. Because I think if we, the athletes, don't worry about status or what's being said, more athletes, entertainers are willing to make a difference. And I think we all made everybody said everything that makes a lot of sense, but I think the athletes sometimes are afraid to do so or make a difference or say something because of status. I have to uphold to this status. What's going to be said? And I agree, when the I Can't Breathe shirt, the first thing I thought the NBA would do would find the players. But not being afraid to step up and say, hey, we support you. We're behind you. And now it made everybody else feel like, hey, it's okay. And like LeBron stepping up and say something. I mean, we have to be careful as athletes at the same time, because the reality is we will be fined or you could be suspended. But I think seeing everybody unite together and to make a difference, put the pressure on the NBA to say, hey, should we find this player? What does that look like to us now? These guys are trying to make a difference to our community, and we're finding them for doing so. So I think that's great. And there again, the word status, what does that mean? And I think you put that aside, and you as a team, and sometimes as an individual, do what's right, stand for what's right. Everybody tends to piggyback that.
It's one of the things I admire most about Perry Wallace was his courage to stand up and speak out. This at a time when he was afraid literally of being shot and killed on the court. It would have been easy for him to choose not to speak up. When Interstate 40 was being built through Nashville, he knew it was going to decimate North Nashville, the African-American neighborhood in Nashville, and Jefferson Street, the main commercial corridor. And he spoke out about that as a sophomore in college. After his very last basketball game, when he could have said, all right, I've made it through this difficult experience, I'm out of here, he gave an interview to the Tennessean, the local newspaper, the day after his last game, and walked through everything that he had been through, including getting kicked out of a white church across the street from campus, including being hit in the face at a game at Ole Miss and the crowd cheering, and the fact that he'd been injured. And he knew that, and he suspected that white Nashville wasn't going to be ready to hear what he had to say, and that in effect he'd be writing his ticket out of town, is the way that he put it. And he had been valedictorian of his high school, he'd been all-SEC, most popular student at Vanderbilt, could have been setting himself up for a bright career in his hometown. But he felt that he had a moral obligation to the people that were going to come behind him to talk about everything that he had been through honestly. And he was right. It was his ticket out of town. The people called the newspaper the next day, canceled their subscriptions, called Perry Wallace ungrateful for what Vanderbilt had done for him, totally did not get the truth of what he was saying. But he said that he knew the way history moves, that someday people will understand what he has to say. And so, you know, for me as an author, I feel that in some ways that's my purpose with the book, is for us now, 45 years later, to be the people that he was waiting for and to get what this man had to say.
Doug, any final thoughts?
And sure, I'll make a plug and then thinking about the work that Diane's doing, the work that Elliot talked about, the team mentoring program. I mean, so much we talk about. It can be a number of strategies, it can be a number of things, but it's that one-on-one relationship. And it's so important because, and Vince talked about status, it becomes very hard to, you know, kind of elevate yourself or fake it if you're talking to a person on a regular basis. So if this individual is talking to a student on a regular basis, it's very hard to, you know, play up and be somebody that you're not, especially when you're answering and giving feedback on something that's so very critical, is them trying to imagine a new life for themselves. Because the thing that anybody that is successful knows is that they rarely, if ever, have done it by themselves. They've always done it in concert and assistance with somebody else. I think about when we talking here and, you know, around this day, around Martin Luther King, and I think about myself and I see Mecca, and we both went to Morehouse College. And one of the things that you understand, just like Dr. King, is that you can do almost anything that you want to in life, but it comes in concert and it comes through linking with others and understanding what is it that I need to bring out in myself in order to make this greatness happen. Martin Luther King, absolutely wonderful, but he was built by Benjamin Elijah Mays and mentored by Benjamin Elijah Mays, president of Morehouse College, who instilled in him all of the facets of the Morehouse mystique. So then that way, when he went on to lead and lead the country, lead the world into a life that we couldn't even imagine, is built upon the words and the understanding of somebody that was early in his life. So by us being able to do that, by us each one remembering how important that is, participating in the team mentoring program, then we can do that, and you never know who you're going to spawn.
And Elliot, I think you said it earlier about how important it is to touch the lives of those around you. And I can't say enough about this and what y'all said today, because I believe in everything that y'all said. And y'all made my job easy today. I mean, I was just sitting here just listening and absorbing this information. But I think us as a whole, all of us have to contribute into raising these kids and touching lives of kids, like you said earlier.
Let me say this, and I know we may end with this, is I know we've consistently harped on what's not happening. A lot of the negative, we talked about the stats and all of those things, but there are a lot of kids doing fantastic. There are a lot of kids out there that are pushing, that are fighting for their education, that are digging and scratching and getting their education. So, you know, when we talk about has a lot changed, a lot has changed for the simple fact that kids have access. They can go to any college they want to go to. They can get any job they want to get. They can be in any place. They can drink from any water fountain. They can do anything they want to do.
But that's the sad part.
But the thing is that they have to apply themselves.
Yes.
There's a process that goes with being successful, and we have to get our kids to see that you can't jump the process. You can't wake up in the morning and be Chauncey Billups. You don't wake up in the morning and be Vince Carter. You don't wake up and be Kobe and LeBron, Earl Monroe. There's a process that goes with getting there, and you have to embrace that process. And once we get our kids to embrace the process, then they go on to be, that's when the light bulb goes off. And I think that's our job, is to continue to encourage them that, sure, you're going to fail. Yeah, you're going to get knocked down. But failing and being a failure, those are two different things. Because all of us, I would venture to say that all of us have had some adversities in our life. And we've had somebody to, You get back up, you get back in the
back up.
game. Yeah. And
That's
so,
right. You get back in
again,
the
I
fight.
wanted to say that because I know we can consistently harp on what's not happening and harp on the stats about our community. But there are a lot of young kids that are getting their education. There are a lot of young kids that are doing great.
That's a blessing. Give our honorees and our panel a great big round of applause. I think this is a very interesting and very exciting. We're going to let our leader lead us off.
Thank you so much. Well, this has been an incredible panel, and I'm really happy, Elliot, that you ended on that note. We don't have a young people problem. We have an adult problem. Young people are mirrors of us. The question was asked, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. So I commend the Grizzlies Foundation for the work that they do, and I commend each of you for the work that you are doing. A theme that I heard was about relationship. Those folks that helped each of us get to where we are. They can't do it by themselves. We must stop pointing our fingers at these young people and start hugging these young people and challenging them, but challenging them in love. I was so moved by the comments from several of you that walking through this place, you were changed. And that is what the National Civil Rights Museum is all about. While we are a museum in name and we house history, this is not history to just be looked at. This is history to learn from. This is history to then move forward and act. Today, your call to action has been, go out there and help some young person. You know, I often look at some of these young brothers walking down the street. They look so hard. And I say to myself, I think he needs a hug. That's all he needs. He needs a hug. So I would encourage each of you to do what you can. You may not want to walk up to just any young brother on the street and hug him.
There we go. That's what I'm talking about.
But do what you can. And for those of you that are here in Memphis, I want you all to come back to the National Civil Rights Museum and be inspired to do more. If you don't live here in Memphis, I want you to come back anyway and be inspired to do more, because this place gives us a lesson plan, if you will, on how we actually can do more. All those folks that are pictured up there, they were just ordinary people who did some extraordinary things. It's within each and every one of us. So I thank you for being here with us this evening. Diane Terrell, thank you so much for this program. And to each and every one of you, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. And come back to the National Civil Rights Museum.
Thank you. Very good.
About 5 more minutes sitting there, though.